Compression is pretty awesome, isn't it? You've got loads of ways of achieving essentially the same thing, bringing down the loud bits and bringing up the quiet bits, but different compressors do it in some very different ways. You've got the classic 1176 style compressor, an FET, which when used aggressively will clamp down on the signal like it owes it money. The 1176, when used sparingly, is still pretty aggressive, but maybe the signal just owes it a drink this time, and it'll let a few things slide. It's feeling a bit generous. That's the attack time, it's going to let a few things through. But of course on the 1176 the knobs go backwards, just to confuse things a little bit. So turning up the attack is actually turning down the attack, but making it attack more. I don't know. They've been modelled by about 1 million different plug-in manufacturers, some which sound identical to the original, some which don't sound identical to the original. I don't know which ones are which because I've never actually used an original unit, and neither have 95% of the people who use the plug-in version. But you can be safe in the knowledge that that new one you just got, that cost you a lot of money, is the one. That sounds perfect. Until the next one comes along, and then that one is the one. You've got the DBX 160 style VCA compressor, which can be fairly aggressive in its own right, but just in a more knocky way than a kind of a smashy way. This VCA compressor is well known for being used on bass and snare, due to the unique effect it has on the transients. It gives the transients a good slap, but it's more like they're knocking on the door as opposed to being squashed. They're saying, hey, I'm a transient, let me in now, I'm nice and compressed, I won't use up too much headroom, I promise. The controls are kind of limited compared to a lot of other compressors that we see. You're either compressing a lot, or not compressing at all, and there's relatively little in between. Those SSL bus compressors that everybody says are the best thing since the previous best thing, well, they're VCA compressors as well, so they've got a fair amount of smack to them. But you can manipulate these a little easier than you can the aforementioned DBX. They've got variable attack, variable release, and auto release, which a lot of people love to use on a mix bus. They've got that sexy VU meter telling you exactly how much compression is being applied. Just keep in mind that a VU meter in the analog world has a response time of around 300 milliseconds. So maybe your favourite plugin emulation has modelled that too, and it's not quite as accurate at monitoring the transients as you think it is. Optical or opto compressors are known for being smooth and buttery and great sounding. They're pretty slow to react despite the detector circuit being made of a lighting element and an optical cell. Light being the fastest thing we really know of, you would think this compressor would be super speedy, but it's not. As the signal increases, the light gets brighter, which tells the compressor to stop being lazy and start doing literally the only thing it's designed to do, compress. Opto compressors are cool on vocal buses. I use them when I've already compressed the living crap out of the vocal and I just want a little bit more compression without it sounding too compressy. The frequency content coming into the compressor will also affect how bright that light is and how fast the attack is. You can think of this as being a frequency dependent non-linear variable attack time, but I wouldn't. Instead, focus on how buttery smooth it is and save the long words for another time. Speaking of words, here are some more. A vari-mu style compressor is often thought of as being vintage and crunchy and cool sounding because of all the valves that it has in it which actually achieve the compression. The classic Fairchild 670 compressor is often thought of as the holy grail of compressors, and to be fair, it does sound pretty fantastic. You can do cool stuff with that, like mid-side compression as well, which I'm not going to go too much into now, but it basically means you can compress the mid-channel different from the sides. So if you've got a master that's got a particularly loud lead vocal, you can bring that down but not affect anything in the sides, like the cymbals or the guitars, which is nice. Speaking of mastering, you've also got the manly vari-mu, which is in a similar vein and often used in mastering houses. It's a nice gentle compressor that can fatten the sound up without being too obtrusive to the original audio. These vari-mu compressors have a set threshold that you essentially shove the audio up into. Then aside from the different types of compressors, you've got a load of different ways that you can use them. You've got parallel compression, where you essentially bring up a compressed version of the sound underneath a not compressed version of the sound, sometimes referred to as New York style compression. It's cool when you want a compressed sound but a not compressed sound at the same time. Think of drums, you want that super squashy, smashy room sound, but you want to retain some of the attack of the transients. It can be really nice. You can also try sidechain compression, where a signal will only be compressed dependent on what's coming into the key input. You can compress a bass guitar, for example, dependent on what's happening in the kick drum. Feed the kick drum into that compressor in the key input, and the bass will only compress when that kick is present. Or you can make your guitars go down by 30 dB when that Slipknot style beer keg is hit just at the beginning of the chorus. Or not, you're the boss, do whatever the hell you want. Multiband compression is cool and weird at the same time, and it's often spoken about by those people who like to use some of those long words that we spoke about earlier. It's pretty simple really. You can just compress specific frequency areas in your original signal that you wouldn't be able to with full band compression. That's normal compression. With multiband you can be a bit more specific about what you want to compress. You just want to compress the high end or just compress the low end. Do what you want. So overall, compression, it's decent. It helps you make stuff fat and thin and loud and quiet all at the same time. That's cool.